Welcome to Rivalry Takeover Week presented by Academy, and we got a very special guest. It is Billy Liucci of TexAgs.com. Been around the block a long time, seen this rivalry take a form in the 90s and 2000s, go away in the 2010s, come back, and for the first time in 15 years, it's making its way to Austin. Just kind of in general, not even looking on the field. Billy, how are Aggie fans feeling about playing in Austin, especially with all the stakes that this game has?
I think it's funny, right? Because I heard the same thing last year from Longhorns. The fan bases are split. You've got I'm really fired up. I want to go down there and beat them on their home field. I want to get to Kyle Field and beat the Aggies right there in College Station. I want to go beat Texas in Austin and go celebrate, out on the town. Then you've got the ones on both sides that are like, I am not going there. I told myself back in the 90s and 2000s, I will never go back. I am not going back there to a game. And so I'm getting both this week, but everybody's really excited about the game. And look, man, for me, this is when you brought back the rivalry, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been a lot of these games down the stretch didn't matter outside of the rivalry, the state pride, walking into work the next day and Thanksgiving dinner, like going to school if you're a high school, you're a young kid but like there weren't high stakes for both teams. And I know that a Texas win doesn't guarantee anything and they still have their work cut out to get in, but there's a chance.
Mm-hmm.
And for A&M, I know they're in the playoffs regardless. And you get some Aggies go, well, at least we'll get a home game that way. But there's a lot at stake for A&M too. And last year, there was a lot at stake for both teams. So for the rivalry to come back like this, the first time in College Station, then the first time in Austin, I think it's fitting. I think to be honest with you, I'm surprised that both of these first two games have mattered this much. If you'd have told me that when you guys were coming in, like not prior to last year, we knew they were going to be good, but like say a couple years earlier, say, hey, these first two games are going to be really, really meaningful for both teams. I probably wouldn't have believed it, but I think it's befitting of the rivalry. And I do think it's interesting that like both the first 2 years that it's mattered a lot more what's happened between the Aggies and Longhorns than Alabama-Auburn, for being honest. I know Alabama's got a lot at stake this week, but this game has meant more in the first 2 years as far as the SEC and national picture go.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the history of it, the ranked team, there's usually one ranked team that walked into this rivalry. In the 90s, it was A&M. In the 2000s, it was Texas. And, usually the ranked team got the better. I think it was like maybe 04 or something like that was one of the first ranked versus ranked games in a while. And now both teams are competing at the highest level, not only in college football, but in the same league in the SEC. And as you said, high stakes kind of switched from last year, just with, A&M being in the playoff this year and Texas being in the playoff last year, kind of regardless, SEC championship stakes, a lot of different things going on. But yeah, I'm with you. It's so great to see that this is going to be a game that means more than just for bragging rights. I don't even know how many times the Big 12 South was even at stake. If we're thinking about it, going back to those days, I know the Southwest
not many at all,
but
not many at all.
And then the other thing, one more off field, like there's a generation of Longhorn fans. My freshman year was 2012, so I missed a college experience that included this game. And there are Longhorn fans who for 15 years haven't seen the core march down Congress Avenue and haven't seen Midnight Yell take place somewhere in Austin, maybe on the Capitol. Like there are aspects of this rivalry that, because this is the first time it's playing in Austin in 15 years, that are coming back that weren't able to come back last year. That's makes it all the more special.
Yeah, no question. And that's a great point. And the other thing that makes me laugh is both sides do this. I think it's so I'm sorry if somebody at Inside Texas tweeted this. I know you wouldn't. Even I wouldn't, and I tweet some dumb stuff. But these things like A&M hasn't won in Austin in
Yeah.
15 years. Well, they won the last time they played there. And even
Right.
I kind of forgot about that. I was like, wait a second. It's Texas that hadn't won there since 20, what was it? 2010,
Oh,
08.
right.
Texas hadn't won in Austin at home since 08. Such a misleading, silly stat. But it is crazy that Von Miller's putting the finishing touches on a Hall of Fame career. Ryan Tannehill had a nice career. He retired. Like, these guys they were the stars for A&M and Cyrus Gray, like, that day. That's how long it's been. Who was Texas' quarterback? Was it
It was Colt
Gilbert?
from
It was
06
Garrett
to
Gilbert.
09, and then Gilbert in 2010. And Colt McCoy's on a broadcast booth now.
Yeah, it was in 2010. It was Garrett Gilbert. So just like when they're saying Texas hadn't won at Kyle Field since it was the last time they played. So this game, man, I'll tell you what. You said they were kind of mirror images again, like last year to this year, and it does feel that way. What's crazy too is, and I think both fan bases and even myself and any of us that cover these teams need to do maybe a little better job of because I kind of underestimated A&M in this regard. There are years where I overestimate A&M when they don't return enough in this department. Last year's Texas team was so experienced, and they had so many NFL guys that were like, and when I say NFL guys, I mean dudes that were like one step from their pros this year, right? Whether they're a first rounder or a fifth rounder, they're pros this year. When you have that much, like Texas did, like Ohio State did, like Georgia did, that's A&M this year. That was Texas last year. So A&M was capable of going up and winning on the road at Notre Dame early, riding through these highs and lows and understanding, like, in game that it's 60 minutes and winning the trenches, winning the line of scrimmage. All that stuff comes with this. This is the most experienced team coming back in college football this year. Everything I said about Texas leading into the year, Joe, and I know a lot of your subscribers over there have fun with it, and or it makes them actually physically angry. I was speaking the truth when Texas was a very inexperienced team in some key areas, namely the O-line. I know you could say, well, they didn't play enough football up front. And then you had a quarterback that wasn't a starter. You had some really new faces at receiver. Like, to me, there was a lot of it that screamed, and you lost some really key players on defense. So I think it was completely understandable that Arch was going to have this journey where he improves throughout the season, and they were going to have to figure things out on the O-line and the defensive interior. And you lost two, I think, great DBs, not good, but great. And it hasn't always been, it's been up and down, and now it seems like in the last few weeks they've really started to figure it out. So I think that was normal, but it was very hard to say that about a team ranked number 1 without getting pushback and a quarterback with Arch's hype. And it was normal to expect A&M to kind of hit the ground running and be a team with staying power, even though it belied the whole 8-4 narrative. So both of them were kind of hard for, I think, all of us that cover these teams to wrap our heads around. I picked the Aggies to go 9-3.
I remember the Florida game. That was that moment where, like, Texas was, I think, clearly more talented, but they had not built up the war wounds to win in a place like that. And that applied to Georgia. Georgia's obviously great and a top 5 team, but, like, losing to that Florida team showed, okay, not that the lights are too bright, because they have been able to pick up some of those wounds that they were scars needed, but just that there's some situations that you can only learn in game. And to that point, Texas A&M, that offensive line, Marcel Reed. I was thinking last year, Marcel Reed was kind of in Connor Weigman's offense. I know they tried to make it as blendable, I guess, as possible. But when you make that mid-year switch, a lot of the things that you're working on and dedicate so much time to in practice, okay, we're switching it. And they still may do with it. Now this year, as we talk about Marcel Reed and just his comfort level, not only with the pieces around him, but in that system, to where the Heisman conversation before the year consisted of Arch, Klubnik, Sellers, Nussmeier, all these different guys. And yet Reed is someone who, I don't know if he's going to win it, but he's someone who is in the conversation and a catalyst for an offense that is making the most of every piece that it has.
Yeah, I think you make a great point in the comfort level and tailoring the offense to it. I've had some conversations with Colin Klein. I've had Marcel in here a lot, and when he was here prior to the season, we talked about, and he just talked about how much time he'd spent with Colin Klein, just understanding what it is Klein wants to do, and him as an OC and a play caller, and then Colin understanding Marcel and them saying, let's figure out what you're most comfortable in. Let's figure out what you do best. I'll tell you that. You tell me what you're most comfortable in, and we'll figure it out, and we're going to make this work. And I think ultimately it's a better fit for what Klein wants to do. Going with Connor last year was the right call at the start of the season until it wasn't, until it just was clear it wasn't gonna work out. I think actually things kind of changed more so for Connor than had the season just started and it had been Marcel. It would look more like what he, I think, typically has done at K-State. But yeah, and you mentioned the weapons. When A&M played Texas last year here at Kyle Field, first of all, Texas defense was ridiculous. Like it was just nasty. And they're still, I still think they're a really good defense. But that one last year was like, it was them, Georgia, and Ohio State. Like that was that. But, he's got an O-line that everybody came back and is a year older. He didn't have Ruben. He had Ruben Owens for like 2 carries in that game. He didn't have Moss, which I don't suspect he will this week either. But I do think Le'Veon could be back as early as if there's an SEC title game or a playoff game in a few weeks, which would be, I think, really significant to the playoff race because that dude I think he would have been a first-team All-SEC back this year. He showed it earlier in the season anyway. So, but no Owens. Jamarian Morrow's a good back. EJ Smith looks like a completely different back. And then, obviously, Concepcion and Craver, Ashton Bethel Roman here in recent weeks. And then on top of that, a guy no one talks about, Nate Borkacher, has been a massive addition in the portal. And if you're a Texas fan and you don't know a lot about him, don't waste your time looking up the stats. They're all right, but just go watch some of his highlight plays. Go see who he scored touchdowns against. The comeback against South Carolina, against LSU, the game winner against Notre Dame. He blocks. He moves chains. He's a really good football player that they got from Nebraska who wasn't even like a full-time starter there. So that's a name, if you're a Texas fan, that to kind of remember if you're not entirely familiar.
As far as looking at the offensive line, I think I had the game against Samford on for some reason, and the radio crew, Monaco and Elmendorf, were talking about how the A&M O-line kind of considers itself to have 7 starters. And I know with guys, Reed Adams entered the year a little banged up. I know Trey Zunes had to move around some, but that seems to be the cliche does hold true. It does all start there, and that experienced unit, just like Texas last year, has helped elevate everybody else.
Yeah, that to return 7 starters in the NIL era, you had to go tell 3 senior tackles. You had to somehow convince 3 senior tackles that I think Crownover and I know Zune will get drafted. I think Crownover, I've had NFL scouts that rave about Crownover's potential and upside. Like 2, if not 3, Fathery will be in a camp without question. And then you also had to convince 2 centers. They've got Naboo and Coley, and then like you said, Zune can play there as well. So keeping all those guys in the NIL era was something that I thought they felt was very important. And a lot of people were kind of raising an eyebrow when you were moving guys around in game early in the season. And now you see why. And it's definitely, I think they've done a great job of coaching and developing that position. And yeah, that's the key to me in this game. And it might not show itself early on, but where A&M has won so many of these games, not won, but even just pulled away in these football games has been as the game wears on. If you look at some of their halftime rushing yardage and then look at what they've done by game's end, it's a pretty significant eye opener if you look at that in SEC play. And then they've also it's a two-way street because they've done a great job of protecting Marcel. But it's also easier when it's a mobile quarterback, obviously. But this unit, I think, Joe, they should be. I think they're in line to win a Joe Moore Award. I also think that they'll be getting their toughest front seven test of the season this week. Notre Dame has gotten better as the year's gone on. I don't think they were great early in the year, but they were good. Obviously, who else is it? Was it Florida's front? I mean,
Florida,
I saw it in Texas, but they're up and down to me. I think Texas defensive front seven will be the best A&M seen. And look, it's probably Colin Simmons as a rusher, although they got a pretty nice little warm-up last week when they had to block Dylan Stewart of South Carolina.
Without a doubt. And then looking over maybe at the Aggie defense, it's you keep talking about experience and how important it is to have that in this NIL era. And you're going to have good players go to the NFL, but Texas A&M has obviously Cassius Howe there in the middle. Old guy, Albert Regis. I remember looking at him and thinking like, wow, that guy's still on the roster. Second level, Torian York, Damian Stanford. And then third level, you got, Will Lee playing great coverage out there, and then some veteran experience at safety. Like, this looks like a defense that Mike Elko put together, including, one that he had at Duke, the ones he had under Jimbo Fisher, the ones he had at Texas A&M, and it's making the most of experience at all three levels. But that first level guy with Cassius Howe, that's a special player. Another great edge defender for A&M. What a surprise.
Yeah, Cassius has been, I remember Elko telling me when they signed him out of Bowling Green, it was like a dogfight. I forget with who, but it was a power program, but they were fighting over this guy from Bowling Green, and they had lost somebody else they lost another guy, and you know how it goes with the fans. The A&M fans were pretty bummed about the guy they lost, and he's like, that's fine. Like, that guy, this is the guy. And they got Cassius, but they had Scorton and Stewart last year. So Cassius, I said many times last year, I felt like he was the best pure pass rusher A&M had. He made plays against Texas. He was all over the field against Auburn. And had they won the bowl game against USC, he was probably the defensive MVP. So he showed it. Every scout that came in here said probably a second rounder, only because he doesn't have a lot of length with his arms. I think he's overcome that this year. He's been so good. And so, yeah, that's another position, Joe, where as the game wears on, that defensive front has been very relentless for A&M, namely their pressure. They get it on the inside on Yedem, DJ Hicks, who I know you remember as a recruit, and Regis. And then at end, it's Cassius leads the way, but Rylan Kennedy can get to the quarterback. TJ Searcy, the Florida transfer. Dayon Hayes, another guy. You think he's got close to 5 sacks as a guy that kind of rolls in, and then Marco Jones, a true freshman. So they've got dudes. They kind of roll them out there. Cassius, though, is the mainstay. And it was an interesting stat. Against South Carolina and Auburn, both those teams took the field 5 times against A&M, 3 for Auburn, 2 for South Carolina, with the ball and a chance to tie or take the lead or win, whatever it was in the fourth quarter. So 5 different possessions. I think the total is 21 plays, 12 yards, 7 sacks on 21 snaps, 12 net yards, and I think 1 first down. So as the game wears on, both lines of scrimmage have really done a good job of wearing down the opposition. That's why you see 35-0 run against LSU in the second half, 31-0 run against Mississippi State when it was a 7-3 game. I think 24-3 run to end the game against Florida, and then this past week that 28-0 second half. If you're Texas, I think that really hammers home the importance, I think, for the Longhorns of getting off to a strong start early, because that's I think the only way to kind of avoid that happening with A&M, because it's their style to kind of wear and tear.
The holiday season is here, and Academy Sports and Outdoors has the legendary gifts you need at undefeatable prices every day. So shop in-store or online at academy.com to save on gifts on everybody's list, from football jerseys and basketball hoops to fire pits and deer stands. The most wonderful time of the year happens here, so this Christmas, give the gift of fun from Academy Sports and Outdoors. I know I mentioned a few of those second and third level players, but I mean, Torian York, I think for a lot of Texas people who are very familiar with Temple High School and all the recruits that have come from there to Texas and have had success, and they watched the Netflix show and they saw all the highlights of how much he cared about this game, and the result went the way it did for A&M, and just how it hurt him, even though he was celebrating a play, but that's a battle, not the war.
Yeah.
When you look at him as a kind of the heart and soul of this defense, what have you seen from him over the course of this year just to get ready to play at a high level for this game?
Yeah, no one works harder. No one wants it more. He puts in the work. Like, he is a guy who he's talented, but he's undersized, but he has and will continue to overcome it. Like, to me, he's a guy that's going to play football for a long time, just because he will not accept the alternative, which is to not be good, which is to not work at it. He's hungry. I think the Texas thing is just it's like Michael Jordan type thing. And I'm obviously not comparing, but you know what I'm saying. From a competitive standpoint, like, Torian York wants motivation. He can find it in that shade of burnt or in that shade of orange, right? Like, and he does. And I think it motivates him. And I've seen it both ways. Like, Texas fans will say this about man, that's pretty sad that he's still, and A&M fans would do the same thing if it was a Longhorn doing this. I think that's just silly. I think you find motivation wherever you can. And to me, if I was him, and I think he will, I'd find motivation in the 300 yards rushing and what Wisner did here at Kyle Field last year. So I think York will be incredibly motivated for this game. He's been big in some of A&M's biggest games this year too. It's just, even when he's kind of quiet, and sometimes he'll get swallowed up by those massive offensive linemen, and then all of a sudden, bam, he'll make a game-changing play. Or I mentioned those fourth quarters. He was all over the Auburn offense and Jackson Arnold down the stretch there in that game. If it turns into a defensive type game, that's when Torian York really tends to shine. And if you look at his career, he's made some of his bigger plays in the way of like sacks and turnovers in the ones that matter.
Last thing I really got, just big picture for the A&M program. Mike Elko signs that big extension, going to keep him around in Aggie land for a while. I never gave any credence to the idea of him leaving, because why would you leave that program? You're competing for SEC championships. You're going to get paid well. You're going to get the players. Never thought he was going to leave, but there's definitely a validation that I'm sure not only he, but Trev Alberts and any other A&M fan would want after signing that contract, that comes from winning this game. If you're A&M, obviously it wouldn't change any status about his job. It would just be a disappointment. But is that something that Elko understands, that there would be a validation for everything A&M's given him after the Jimbo Fisher era if he comes to Austin and leaves with a win?
Yeah, I think you're right, but I also think it ties in with more, right? Like, it's just one of the things. Like, yes, beat Texas. I mean, we know how much this means to both teams. I don't care if anybody says otherwise, they're lying. Like, we know it. And some of us will just wear it on our sleeve and own it. And other people try to play this whole, oh no, it's, on both sides. For A&M, you could say, oh, we're in the playoff regard. No. It is a huge deal. It would be just this giant feather in the cap. But I think more importantly, getting to an SEC title game. I know people think it are starting to do this whole thing with the 12-team playoff. It doesn't matter. It does. Like winning a Southeastern Conference championship. I've covered this league this is year 14 now. Big 12 was only 16 for A&M and me. 14 years. It's Georgia and Alabama almost every year. LSU's won it once, and
Auburn stuck in
Auburn
there.
won it once. Auburn won it in 2013,
Yep.
and LSU won it in 2019. And I'm pretty sure like that's it since A&M's been in the SEC. So if you go win that, it's really significant. You know, it's famous that A&M hasn't won a conference title since I was in college, since 1998. And by the way, yeah, did lose in Austin that year. I still contend y'all watered the field down, but that you can ask Mac Brown or Ricky Williams about that. But
it didn't affect Major Applewhite.
No, it didn't affect Casey Hampton and Sean Rogers. I just hosted a show with Seth McKinney, and I always give him a hard time about that. I'm like, could you not have blocked those dudes? He's like, you try blocking them. He goes, those were two of the hardest guys to block in the whole NFL. But get back on topic here. I think, you beat Texas, you play for an SEC title for the first time. And I'll be honest with you. There are a lot of ways I like a matchup with Alabama more than I do Texas in terms of like just how the teams match up, strengths, weaknesses. I like A&M to go down to Atlanta, and if they get the opportunity to play Bama, I like their chances in that football game. So you have a chance to win an SEC title, get there for the first time, hold up a trophy for the first time in almost 30 years here. And I know people would love a home playoff game here, but you're automatically advanced to essentially the Elite Eight if you win. Maybe if you just win on Friday night, but certainly if you win both. And I think that's significant. I really do. You get healthy, you get guys ready to go. And by the way, last I checked, going undefeated in a regular season in any Power 5, much less the SEC, is hard.
Yeah.
Texas was a great team last year. They didn't do it. Georgia was a great team last year. They didn't do it. Penn State played in the Final Four last year. They didn't do it. Ohio State lost 2 games last year. I think that is something that no one can take away from Elko or the A&M program either, is if you win that game and cap off a perfect regular season, they don't come around often.
I will say, after getting the chance to watch a home playoff game, it's not a bad consolation prize. But if Texas A&M, I think, were they to win Friday, yeah, that's a team that deserves a first round bye, undoubtedly.
And I'm going to tell you, Joe, it's interesting if you fall into that like 6. I almost said it. I was going to say if you fall into that 6, 7. But I mean, you know how many people I've got too many college kids in here that are going to be laughing when I said that. But all the interns and the young workers, anytime you say it, they laugh now. And don't you dare accidentally say the word chance. Like, I think they have a chance. Then they're going to respond with that whole thing. But it's fun. But if you like fall into that spot, you start looking at who the opponents might be. So you might not be playing that G5 team at home. It might be OU. It might be Miami. It might be Notre Dame. It might be Texas. Who knows? But I'm saying you're running a risk of catching, a much better team in a whole extra game that you don't have to play if you go handle business Friday night at DKR and figure out a way to beat your rival.
Yeah, and I guess last thing, A&M's been good at cutting through the noise, and there's a lot of noise around all these different programs in the SEC title race, thanks to news coming from Oxford. So, I mean, if you don't have to play that game, you somehow I know the tiebreakers came out, but if you don't have to play that game, you still get your first round bye. You still get to have the joy of a 12-0 season, and then you face a team that has another game who, if it is, let's say it's OU and Oregon. Okay, those teams beat each other up, and then you get to play them in Dallas or New Orleans. Like, you're ignore the data from last year about all the teams with buys getting, having troubles. Like, that's 1 year data set. It's going to look a lot different because
it was Arizona State as kind of the favored home team or whatever you want to call it against Texas, and it was Boise State against Penn State. Like, so it was a little misleading.
It was wonky, but it was fun. So
yeah,
man, Billy, this has been great. Thank you for making some time. I know it's been a busy. This is probably the busiest week of the year for you and for all of us as we get back in the swing of covering this rivalry again. And it's always awesome catching up with you, and always great to. You don't need me to do it, but highlighting all the stuff that Texags does over in College Station.
Yeah, and y'all keep up the good work. I think people sometimes don't realize the friendships we've got. And we were joking about how could Wells not be interviewing me? I don't know. We're gonna have to give him a hard time for not being available. But Joe, you and I go back a long ways too, and I know you work with Bronny a lot for baseball, and hell, Nolan and I have some stories from way back in the day as well. So you guys keep it up, and appreciate you, and happy Thanksgiving.
Absolutely, happy Thanksgiving to you, Billy. We appreciate it, and let's get ready for this game.
Oh, man, I'm beyond ready. We're 3 days out, and it's like, come on, just get here. Let's skip the turkey and stuffing or dressing, whatever the hell you want to call it, and let's go.
That's why they call it Rivalry Takeover by Academy, right? So thanks again, and we'll see you next time on the Inside Texas Football YouTube channel powered by InsideTexas.com.